By midnight on Monday, the White House knew, but none of us knew.
Reckless negligence that killed human beings.
They wanted them poor niggas out of there. And they ain't had no intention to allow it to be reopened to no poor niggas.
Of Hurricane Katrina, which ravaged the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. The storm was the most powerful and expensive natural disaster to hit the U.S., killing more than 1,500 people in New Orleans alone, displacing some 770,000 residents and destroying over 300,000 homes. The federal government's response to the disaster was widely condemned. Images of the tens of thousands of New Orleans residents piling into the city's Superdome Stadium, pleading for food, water, and aid, became symbolic of the government's inaction. In the aftermath of the storm, it became increasingly clear that the effects of Hurricane Katrina were made far worse by government incompetence and neglect. Warnings about the severity of the storm were ignored, and the levees, which were supposed to prevent New Orleans from flooding, were grossly inadequate. And as investigative reporter Greg Palast reveals in this new Democracy Now! Report, there were major holes in the city's evacuation plan.
Reckless negligence that killed human beings. Had old ladies watch the water come up to their nose, over their eyes, and they drowned in houses just like this in this neighborhood because of reckless negligence that's unanswered for.
By midnight on Monday, the White House knew, but none of us knew.
They wanted them poor niggas out of there. And they ain't had no intention to allow it to be reopened to no poor niggas. You know, and that's just the bottom line.
Drop me off the road.
Our president says he hasn't forgotten a promise he made here.
I want the people down there to understand that it's going to take a while to recover. This is a huge storm.
Well, Mr. President, I think people down here know it was a huge storm. Over 500,000 of them fled the flood. It's been a full year, and only 170,000, far less than half, have come back, almost none to their own homes.
I stayed 3 nights here and 1 night on the bridge. So
you were 3 nights stuck in the flood?
Right here.
This is Stephen Smith. Like 127,000 others in this town, he didn't have a car in which to escape, so he was left in the rising waters. Stranded in the heat on a bridge, he closed the eyes of a man who died of dehydration after giving his grandchildren his last bottle of water. What kind of evacuation plan would leave 127,000 to sink or swim? It turns out that the Bush administration had contracted out evacuation planning to a corporation, IEM, Innovative Emergency Management. I couldn't locate their qualifications, but I did locate their list of donations to the Republican Party. We went to Baton Rouge to talk to them.
These are the offices of Innovative Emergency Management. They're the ones that were paid $500,000 to come up with an emergency evacuation plan for the city of New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina. One problem is, I can't find the plan. So I'm coming here to ask them about it.
So when I showed up at their office, they would only talk to me from behind a glass wall, by phone.
Did you in fact come up with a plan? Because it says it's urgent to come up with a plan. Did you come? Can you just tell me if you came up with a plan or not? Yeah. I'm just happy to talk to you one-on-one. You're probably about 12 feet away from me. Or somewhere. You know, I mean, I don't know, are you hiding in this office somewhere? I'm happy to speak to you face to face. We can't find your plan, neither can FEMA, that you were paid $500,000 for it, that at least claimed to here. We can't find this plan, and it's kind of a problem. I guess it's kind of hard to evacuate a city if you can't find the plan itself.
She's got a lot of experience in evacuation.
Is it more true that maybe it was helpful that she gave a lot of donations to the Republican Party? Maybe that's the experience?
Yeah.
So that's when they called in the guards.
Security has been called. We ask that you please leave the building now.
So quickly, before security gets here, I just want to tell you that this is Innovative Emergency Management. And it's very innovative not to have a plan to manage an emergency.
I decided to look for someone with a little more experience in hurricane evacuation. LSU, Louisiana State University. They're just down the street from IEM. LSU has one hellacious football team, They also have the best team of hurricane experts in the nation. I met with Dr. Ivor van Heerden, Deputy Director of the university's elaborate Center for the Study of Hurricanes. I asked this renowned specialist about the reputation of IEM prior to their getting the $500,000 evacuation exercise contract.
I hadn't heard of them prior to this exercise, no.
The LSU scientists already had an evacuation model, but IEM and FEMA refused to use it.
We had the science. We had really studied this thing. We knew what was going to go wrong. We had an enormous amount of information, right down to mapping where the gas tanks were and pipelines. Science was basically ignored all the way through the process.
The LSU professors warned, for example, that the IEM plan simply made no provision for people, the old, the sick, who couldn't escape in a car. Then the professor surprised me by saying that giving us this information put his job at risk.
I wasn't going to let them let those sort of threats shut me down or any of the other sorts of nonsense they went on, because it was so important that we get out what had gone wrong and why.
Apparently, the heat from the university originated with a state official who now works for IEM.
We got a phone call from somebody in the state government who actually now works for IEM, but I don't think that was his plan at the time. And he jumped all over me and said by criticizing their work I was putting the whole exercise in jeopardy, and if I did it again I would be banned.
Back in New Orleans, former city councilman Brod Baggert, a lawyer, standing in the gutted wreckage of his own home, did not think kindly of the concealment of Van Heerden's warnings.
Ongoing protection that should have been occurring was done. It was done negligently. Not only wrong, negligently. And not only negligently, but reckless negligence. The kind of negligence for which an individual would be indicted, prosecuted, tried, convicted, and spend their life in jail. Negligence that killed people, lots of people. Reckless negligence that killed human beings. Had old ladies watch the water come up to their nose, over their eyes, and they drowned in houses just like this, in this neighborhood, because of reckless negligence that's unanswered for.
So now we've discovered why there is no real plan of escape. But that leaves the question, why did the water flood the city? People drowned. The city drowned.
Destroyed house, destroyed house, destroyed house, destroyed house, destroyed house. Every single house on every single block, mile after mile after mile of residential urban neighborhoods are completely destroyed and remain destroyed.
Baggert took us to a neighbor's house near the levee.
So look.
By midnight on Monday, the White House knew. But none of us knew.